In a single week in May 2026, Beijing's Tiananmen Square hosted two men with fundamentally different roles in China's future: U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. On the surface, the visits were indistinguishable. Both leaders were met with the same marching columns of soldiers, the same red carpets, and the same choreographed rows of children waving flags. These highly visible ceremonies were designed to project an aura of global stability, suggesting a world where the three largest powers were still operating within a shared framework of respect. But the identical optics hide a stark reality. Beneath the handshakes, these two summits represent two entirely different strategies for China's survival. Donald Trump's three-day stay focused on immediate friction. The schedule was heavy on ceremonial hospitality, including a rare tour of the Zhongnanhai Imperial Gardens, intended to flatter a president known to value visible displays of respect. The visit was transactional. It ended with a pledge for China to purchase 200 Boeing jets and $17 billion in American agricultural products, a commercial fix for a complicated trade war. Vladimir Putin's two-day visit was different. He bypassed the tourist sites, spending almost the entire trip inside the Great Hall of the People for intensive, closed-door negotiations with China's top leadership. Putin walked away with over 40 strategic agreements, covering everything from microchips to energy, along with a formal extension of the 25-year-old China-Russia Treaty of Good Neighborliness. While the American president left with a sales receipt, the Russian president left with a blueprint. Xi Jinping is managing the U.S. as a volatile competitor, while treating a sanctioned Russia as a foundational partner in a world built without Washington. The intensity of the Putin summit was a direct response to a series of global explosions that had occurred just months earlier. In January 2026, U.S. Special Forces launched a surprise raid on a military base in Caracas to capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, an operation that instantly threatened China and Russia's interests in Latin America. Facing the loss of a major regional foothold, Beijing and Moscow avoided direct combat. Instead, they coordinated at the UN to condemn the move as a return to colonialism, positioning themselves as the protectors of sovereignty for the global South. Weeks later, the Middle East ignited. Massive U.S. and Israeli airstrikes targeted Iranian leadership, leading Iran to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, a choke point that handles a massive portion of the world's oil. To bypass the resulting Western blockades, China and Russia deployed joint naval drills and utilized a shadow fleet of aging tankers to keep Iranian oil flowing into Chinese ports. These crises forced a shift in the alliance. In the face of U.S. military pressure, Beijing and Moscow moved beyond rhetoric to active, coordinated intervention on the global stage. The friction eventually reached Northeast Asia, where tensions between China and Japan spiked over the possibility of Japanese intervention in a Taiwan conflict. China retaliated with economic coercion, cutting off exports of the critical minerals, like gallium and germanium, that are vital to Japan's high-tech manufacturing sector. Russia provided immediate military cover, conducting joint naval patrols with China near the Taiwan Strait to challenge the defensive lines of the U.S. and its allies in the Pacific. When you connect Venezuela, Iran, and Taiwan, a clear pattern emerges. Every crisis traces back to a unified response in Moscow and Beijing. These aren't localized disputes. They are a synchronized effort to exhaust the military and economic bandwidth of the United States. The simultaneous collapse of security in these three regions shows a global system that is no longer held together by a single set of rules. This is the context for those 40 agreements signed in May 2026. They are the tools China and Russia are using to build a way out of the current global order. The goal is a parallel global ecosystem, a world where they can trade, communicate, and exercise power without relying on Western technology or financial systems. They are merging their satellite navigation systems, aligning Russia's GLONASS with China's Baidu to create a unified network completely independent of American GPS. They've also pledged to co-develop artificial intelligence and enforce internet sovereignty, creating a digital wall that effectively locks Western tech giants out of their territories. While the West focuses on traditional military containment, China and Russia are building the technological infrastructure required to decouple from the US dollar and American software entirely. This split leaves middle powers in an impossible position. South Korea, for instance, relies on the U.S. for its defense, but depends on the Middle East and increasingly the Sino-Russian energy corridor for its oil. This creates a survival dilemma. Nations can no longer easily rely on Washington for their security while looking to the China-Russia bloc for their economic future. Global supply chains, banking networks, and defense pacts are hardening into two separate, self-contained systems that no longer overlap. During the summit, Xi and Putin warned that this era of friction risks turning the world back into a law of the jungle. They are building the satellites, the independent software, and the energy corridors to ensure they sit at the top of that jungle's new food chain.